Timex states that this watch is inspired by the original motoring watches that graced the tracks of Europe's most iconic races. This timepiece celebrates the endurance of their legendary 1970s Q Timex. I'm very excited to have one in-house to review for you guys, so let's jump in and take a closer look. This watch has a diameter of 40 millimeters. The lug to lug is 46.3. Thickness is 13.5 up to that domed mineral crystal. Lug width is 18 millimeters and the strap flares out to 22 millimeters and back down to 18 millimeters at the buckle. The weight is 78 grams and this watch is running an Epson YM 12A quartz movement with a rated 5 years battery life, and with the push-pull crown this watch is rated at 50 meters of water resistance. If you find this video helpful, please do like and subscribe as I'm trying to grow my channel and would really appreciate that. Now let's take a closer look at this bezel. Unlike a dive watch, this bezel does not rotate on these chronographs. In fact, it has a nicely polished bezel with a smooth finish. The bezel is made of steel. It's got a black background with silver text. The text printing is crisp and clear, and I must say the size and proportion of the bezel is just right. It's not too narrow or too wide, and the 60 marker on the tachymeter lines up perfectly with the minute tracker on the dial, and it lines up perfectly with the seconds hand. No Seiko style misalignment here. Now let's take a closer look at that lovely dial. The dial is one of the stars of the show here. It's one of the reasons that I was interested in this watch. It has a lovely cream color, which brings out that nice vintage charm that Timex was aiming for. There's a black minute tracker that runs along the outside of the dial. According to Timex, the indices on here were actually hand applied. They do have a very, very light application of Lume, which runs along the center. We'll have a Lume Shot towards the end of the video to take a closer look at the Lume performance. The quality of the indices is okay. They are fully polished, but I do see a blemish at the 5 o'clock index, for example. Also, I would have liked to seen the indices to have more depth along with the Q logo at the 12 o'clock. As it is, they appear to be a bit flat, which can make the watch look a bit cheap. That is about standard at this price point, but it just looks like Timex is not going above and beyond. The handset is also nicely done, especially the seconds hand with that double lollipop design. There are 3 subdials, as you can see, in black with white printing and a polished hand. More on these subdials when we check out the movement. Overall, the legibility of the dial is really good, and that's not something that I can always say about a chronograph. So kudos to Timex for such a terrific design and being able to achieve that high level of legibility. There is also a date cutout at 4:30 position. I don't mind this placement as it's a bit inconspicuous and doesn't take away too much from the symmetry of the dial. Now this dial is also protected, as I said, by a domed mineral crystal, which just adds to that vintage charm. It has the distortion, but of course it does not have the durability of a sapphire crystal. Now taking a closer look at the case finishing, this case appears to be the same one that Timex has used on their recently released GMT and dive style watches. The tops of the lugs are all polished. The polishing quality though does not appear to be great. The reflections that come off of that polished section appear to be blurry. They kind of cheapen the look of the watch. It almost looks like one of those finishes that looks like it's chrome coated instead of an actual polished stainless steel. That's a bit of a letdown, as that's a surface that you're constantly seeing when you look down at your wrist. The brush section is a much nicer finish and adds a good amount of contrast. The sides of the case are also polished. Now the sides don't look as bad as the tops of the lugs, and I think this comes down to the fact that there's no contrasting surfaces on the sides, whereas when you're looking at the watch straight on, you contrast that polished surface with the brush surface, and you've got the bezel insert and the dial on the other side. There's no sharp edges anywhere on this case. In fact, I wish that Timex did have some sharper lines on the case. As it is, it's a bit dull looking. All the transitions on the case look really soft, and it comes off looking as though it's lacking some precision on the case finishing. Now this watch isn't exactly cheap. There's cheaper Timexes that have this type of case finishing, so hopefully Timex can step up their case finishing for future releases. Taking a look at the case back here, we've got the classic Timex battery operated hatch for battery changes. Also note some of the printing here. It does say assembled in China. The stickers also note that the movement is Japanese and the strap is Chinese. So the printing, the stamping on the back of the strap does say Red Wing, Minnesota, USA. But I'm guessing the strap is not made there, since it does say strap China on the back of the case. So let's take a closer look at this chronograph movement. So when I pull out the crown to the first position, it will allow me to adjust the date. There you can see. When I pull out the crown all the way, it allows me to adjust the time. And that also hacks the seconds hand, which is on the left subdial. And as I change the time, you can also see the subdial on the right shows the 24-hour readout, and that is also being adjusted at the same time. And the subdial at the bottom is your timer for the chronograph. So when I push the top pusher, the seconds hand will start the timer, and after it completes one turn around the dial for 60 seconds, it will move the 60-minute subdial by 1 minute. When I push the pusher again, it stops the timer, and when I push the bottom pusher, it will reset both dials back to the start position. One area where I was pleasantly surprised was this leather strap. So this has a nicely textured appearance, as you can see. The quality of the leather seems to be really nice. It feels nice on the wrist, nice and comfortable. It's got a good amount of pliability to wrap around the wrist. It's got a nice smooth leather finish on the back, and the color is almost like a dark burgundy shade on the back. There's contrasting stitching of that same darker shade. And on this side you'll see it's got the two keepers. One is floating and one is fixed. And it's also got a nicely brushed and stamped buckle. If I flip it over to the back, you'll see it's stamped with that SB Foot Tanning Co. Red Wing, Minnesota, USA. And it's got quick release pins, which is a nice touch. But just keep in mind that the lug width on the case is 18 millimeters, and this strap does flare out to 22, like I said. So if you do fit it with an 18 millimeter strap, it is going to look much narrower than the supplied one here. And here is how the watch wears on my 6.5 inch wrists. So this watch is about 13.5 millimeters thick. So it's not exactly thin enough to easily slide in under a shirt cuff or a sweater sleeve, so keep that in mind. Now here is a Lume Shot, and as you can see, Lume is going to be disappointing. That's really not the reason to purchase this watch. The Lume on the hands is somewhat legible in the dark, the seconds hand is a bit better, and the indices is almost non-existent. I hope you guys found that review helpful. If you did, please do like and subscribe to my channel for more content. You know, this chronograph was a bit of a pleasant surprise from Timex. I like the overall package at this price point, and I really do like that dial color. I don't know which one I like more between the two of them, to be honest. The GMT, there's just so many other diver style watches. to choose from, whereas having a nice looking chronograph with an affordable price point was a refreshing change. So I would probably pick the chronograph between the two of them. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Please do let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.